Uncharted series on the PlayStation 3 has been widely regarded as some of the best entertainment that the system has to offer. Only a few months after the release of the third installment, Uncharted 3 Drake's Deception, and coinciding with the release of the PlayStation Vita, is the fourth entry, Uncharted Golden Abyss. Not only is this the first time that the series has appeared on a handheld, but it's also the first time the series creators Naughty Dog have not actually been directly involved, and instead it's been developed by Bend Studios. So with a new studio at the helm and being a launch title, Golden Abyss could have tainted Naughty Dog's beloved franchise. Thankfully, it's turned out to be one of the main reasons to actually own a Vita. Set as a prequel to the original trilogy, you're back in Nathan Drake's adventurous boots, this time uncovering the dark secret behind the 400-year-old massacre of a Spanish expedition, following the murderous trail of an ancient and secret Spanish section. New characters are introduced in the form of Jason Dante, Drake's old friend, and new love interest Marissa Chase, who's the granddaughter of an archaeologist who's mysteriously vanished with Trace in Central America in search of a legendary lost city. Writing is still as impressive as previous installments, with great banter being knocked around. At times you'll completely forget that Naughty Dog aren't actually responsible. Chase is a much more believable character than Elena from the first Uncharted, refusing to use a gun and overall being considerably more interesting. Dante, on the other hand, is much less memorable as a character, being pretty predictable in his intentions. And then halfway through the campaign, Sully turns up and picks up the game's pace just as it shows sign of fatigue. He's like the cool uncle that arrives late to a party to remind you how much you've actually missed him, even if you didn't realise it. Gameplay on the whole is largely the same as previous iterations, the bulk being cover-based third-person shooting, predetermined platform sections and the occasional puzzle. But now added touchscreen and motion sensing have been incorporated into the main mechanic states of the Vita. Some work, others actually improve the experience, but there's also the fair share that irritate and frustrate. Starting with the good, when aiming, the Vita's analog stick can seem a bit finicky, but physically moving the Vita in conjunction to accurately line up the perfect headshot is surprisingly intuitive. Likewise, there's now plenty of puzzles littered throughout the campaign's 8-hour trek, and these work very well, ranging from the many chalk rubbings as well as the simple puzzle pictures that are acquired via taking pictures using Drake's new camera. If you felt there weren't enough collectibles in this series before, then Golden Abyss will definitely surprise, because there are so many it's almost overwhelming. There's also optional touchscreen controls for the climbing sections, whereby you simply drag your finger across the wall and Drake will follow suit. This setup works well enough, but just highlights the linear nature of the platform sections, as well as being somewhat disposable. But there's also some mechanics that feel forced and just don't work as well as they should. The most frequent culprit is the touchscreen swipes when you get into a brawl with an enemy. Not only does it break the flow of play, it doesn't always work 100% of the time in some of the intense battles. As a result, you'll end up keeping your distance to avoid hand-to-hand combat altogether. Now and again you'll come across bamboo and pieces of cloth that need to be cut down using the touchscreen. 3 swipes is usually required, as Drake just lifelessly waits you to perform the required actions until he then hacks away himself. Why you don't just slice away in real time is just bizarre. But by far the most annoying element is balancing. Luckily they're few and far between, but they're frequent enough to become a recurring nuisance. Every so often you'll be forced to walk across a thin plank or log, which 9 times out of 10 will cause Drake to stop to regain his balance by tilting the system. For a man with such agility to climb, jump and fight, this seems stupidly out of place. It's not responsive enough, it breaks the game's flow, and it's just another example of a false mechanic, just because the Vita can do it. It's very reminiscent of the first Uncharted game, which also forced motion control in the way of 6-axis. It wasn't in the 2 sequels that followed because it was annoying and unnecessary, so why Bend Studios fell down the same trap here is equally irritating. In fact, a lot of Golden Abyss mimics Drake's fortune. Apart from the abundance of motion control, its majority of environments are jungle and temple settings. It has a complete lack of competitive online multiplayer and dumb AI. Like Drake's fortune, Golden Abyss also shows some impressive visuals for a system so early in its life cycle. While character animations don't run as smoothly as its PS3 incarnations, and fire effects look noticeably rough, there are moments where you'll just stop and gawp at the incredible scenery, sometimes forgetting you're looking at a handheld. Uncharted Golden Abyss may suffer from a few technical faults that stop it from being a classic like Uncharted 2 and 3, but it certainly doesn't dampen the franchise and is well worth your time if you own a PlayStation Vita or are just a fan of the series.